Hi, today I'll be talking about the issues in immigration laws. So the table of contents. So I'll start off the PowerPoint by talking about the immigration, what is immigration and what are immigration laws. I'll continue with the history of immigration laws, how the charter is related to immigration laws, the legislation, a major case about immigration laws, how the political spectrum is related to it, and finally the conclusion. So let's start off with what is immigration or immigration laws. First, we must start off by defining what an immigrant is. An immigrant can be defined as someone who comes to live permanently in a foreign country. People come to Canada for various reasons, such as job opportunities or to escape unfavorable conditions. The immigration laws are the national government policies that control the movement to and within Canada. The immigration laws regulate who is allowed inside Canada and the requirements needed to enter Canada. The current act that governs all immigration laws is the Immigration and Refugee Protection Act. The Immigration and Refugee Protection Act was made in 2001 and came in effect in 2002. Alright, so let's move on to the history. Immigration to Canada has been regulated all the way back since 1869, which is when the first ever Immigration Act came into place. This act was the basic framework of the Canadian immigration policy. It was a very lenient policy, and anyone could immigrate to Canada except criminals. The next Immigration Act was in 1906. In this act, any former inmates of prison or mental institutions were not allowed to immigrate to Canada. When World War I started, the War Measures Act was passed in 1914. This act ended immigration to Canada from Europe because Canada and Britain were at war with European countries. Britain needed the residents to stay and fight in the war, and it became too dangerous for immigrants to cross the Atlantic. If a person was from a country that Canada and Britain was at war with and was living in Canada, they would be considered an enemy alien and would have to carry an ID card at all times. In 1919, a new rule was added into the Immigration Act, which allowed the government to not let certain races or nationalities immigrate to Canada. In 1947, the Canada Citizenship Act was created, and this act entailed that Canadians were no longer British subjects. Later, in 1952, an act passed which allowed certain people to enter the country more easily than others, but in 1962 this act was dropped because of the discrimination. In 1967, the point system was introduced. This gave an advantage to those who had a good education, family members in Canada, were already employed in Canada, and knew French or English. At the time, the points were on a scale from 1 to 10, instead of the 67 points that is in place today. After the point system was passed, Canada increased its immigration to include countries in the Middle East, Africa, Caribbean, and Asia. The first time an Immigration Act clearly stated the objectives of immigration was in 1976. The last Immigration Act was made in 2001, which is called the Immigration and Refugee Protection Act. This is the act that is followed today. So let's move on to the immigration laws and how it's related to the Charter. So many immigrants come to Canada. So first, let's define the Charter. The Charter is a part of the Constitution of Canada, which is the set of laws of how our country operates. It contains all the rights and freedoms that Canada believes are needed for a free and democratic country. The Charter protects the rights and freedoms of all Canadians. So many immigrants come to Canada so that they can be protected under the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. Canada is a place that is fair and will protect its citizens, irrespective of their race or religion. In Canada, everyone is given a fair opportunity to pursue what they want and no one is discriminated. Everyone is under the law, giving no preferential treatment to those with more fame or popularity. Everyone has equal opportunity to exercise their rights. Two of the main sections of the Charter that could relate to immigration laws were Section 2 and Section 15. Section 2A states that everyone has the following fundamental freedoms. A. Freedom of conscience and religion. B. Freedom of thought, belief, opinion, and expression, including freedom of the press and other media of communication. Section 15 states that every individual is equal before and under the law and has the right to the equal protection and equal benefit of the law without discrimination, and in particular without discrimination based on race, national or ethnic origin, color, religion, sex, age, or mental or physical disability. This these the Canadian Charter makes Canada a very attractive spot for immigrants, as many countries, such as my home country, Pakistan, don't have any type of charter in place. Many people get thrown into jail for speaking up, and there is no freedom of thought or belief or opinion or expression in many countries. Also, in countries like that, many people are not considered equal. If one person can easily bribe a cop or do anything of that nature and do it without any punishment, and that is something that is what makes Canada such a good spot for immigrants to come, as they could feel equal under the charter. Alright, let's move on to the legislation. The legislation that covers immigration laws is in the federal jurisdiction and is called the Immigration and Refugee Protection Act. The IRPA is a basic framework which details the guidelines and goals regarding immigration to Canada set by the Canadian government. Some of the main goals of the IRPA are to permit Canada to pursue the maximum social, cultural, and economic benefits of immigration, to see that families are reunited in Canada, to protect public health and safety, and to maintain the security of Canadian society. This act is responsible for everyone who immigrates to Canada and is divided into 5 main parts. The first one is immigration to Canada. This part of the act covers everything about the process to immigrate to Canada. It lists all the requirements that are needed to enter Canada. It starts from applying to Canada, to entering and remaining in Canada, all the way to the rights given in Canada. The second part of the act is refugee protection, and this covers everything a refugee needs to know about the rights and protection in this country. The third part is enforcement. This covers what would happen if a person is caught doing something illegal, such as human smuggling and trafficking and other general offenses. The fourth part is the Immigration and Refugee Board. This part gives an immigrant or refugee all the information that is needed about the board. The fifth and final part of the Act is the transitional provisions, consequential and related amendments, coordinating amendments, repeals, and the coming into force. It states all the major acts an immigrant should know. When a person is not able to listen or comply with the provisions of the IRPA, they may get a removal order from Canada. The Immigration and Refugee Protection Act has governed Canada for the past 12 years, and it has been a great law as Canada is known as one of the more safer countries in the world. Alright, so one major case that dealt with immigration and Canada was Baker v. Canada. Mavis Baker was a woman from Jamaica who was living illegally in Canada for about 11 years as a domestic worker. First, she was living in Canada legally through a visitor's visa, but ended up overstaying it. Over the course of her time living in Canada, she had 4 children. After she got caught of living in Canada legally, she was ordered to be deported. She then applied for a permanent residency through the Immigration and Refugee Protection Act, in which an immigration officer declined her without giving any reason or explanation. After that, she applied for a judicial review for the situation. Once she took it to the federal courts, they also rejected her application. Finally, the case went to the Supreme Court of Canada, where they reversed the decision of the federal court. Mavis Baker had 3 main arguments. She argued that they should review her application on the basis of humanitarian and compassionate grounds, and felt it was unjust that she did not even get an oral hearing. She also felt it was unfair that her application was denied without any reasoning. Finally, she felt that her kids had a strong connection and they would hurt both her and the kids mentally and emotionally if she was deported. Eventually, she did end up getting a permanent residence in Canada and didn't have to leave her 4 kids. This was a very big and controversial case that a lot of people were not happy about. Many people felt that because she had schizophrenia, she would not be able to take care of her kids either way, so she did not need to be here in Canada. She also had 4 kids in Jamaica on top of her 4 kids in Canada, which is what made people feel as though she should have been deported back. Some people viewed it economically and felt as though she was going to be on welfare the entire time she was here, so she shouldn't have been allowed to stay. On top of that, she was also living illegally in Canada in the first place, so many people felt it was unfair and justice wasn't served because she got to stay in Canada. Not everyone felt the ruling was unfair, as some people agreed with it, because although she should not have been in Canada in the first place, she still had 4 kids. It would be extremely unfair for those 4 kids to have to either go back to Jamaica or live without their mom, because it's something they could not control. So let's move on to the political spectrum. There are two main aspects of the political spectrum. The first is the economic and fiscal aspect, while the other is the social moral harm aspect. The right side of the political spectrum is capitalism and fascism, while the left side of the political spectrum is socialism and communism. For the economic aspect of the spectrum, the left side of the spectrum is 100% taxation, which means that everything is free and everything one earns goes to the government. The right side is 0%, which means that everyone keeps all the money they make and give nothing to the government. The conservatives who are in power today are on the right side of the political spectrum. The liberals are in the middle, slightly to the right, and the New Democratic Party is on the left side of the political spectrum. The Conservative Party of Canada feel that immigrants have been taking advantage of our immigration system, and because of that, Canada needs to be stricter. They believe that immigration should be merit-based, and the main criterion that we should be looking for is Canada's economic needs. They have tougher laws on illegal immigrants. The Conservatives do not value reuniting families high for immigration applications, and they only value the economic aspect and not the family aspect. On the other hand, the New Democratic Party feel that reuniting families should be the main principle to bring immigrants to Canada, and they value reuniting families very highly compared to the other two parties. The NDP completely disagree with what the Conservatives' idea for immigration is and how they are bringing in many temporary foreign workers. NDP feel that they drive wages down and that even when they get money, they almost never use it here and send most of it back home. They feel that this cheap labor is useless and that Canada's immigration system should focus more on reuniting families instead of cheap labor workers, which is what the Conservatives want. The Liberal Party of Canada wants a lot of immigrants in our country, and they plan to have more recruitment of immigrants so Canada can meet the labor and research needs. So, conclusion. Immigration laws are a very controversial topic in Canada. Regardless of what the laws are, some people will always disagree with them. A lot of countries are diverse, but Canada is unique because multiculturalism is not only a value, but it's also a federal policy. Yet, shown through this PowerPoint, there are many holes in our system, and arguably always will be. Whether it is the process of immigration or discrimination of refugees, the issues surrounding immigration laws are not easily eradicated and remain almost inescapable in society. Every step of immigration has some sort of problem and can improve. The wait and process times are extremely long, and some refugees do not have the same rights as other citizens when they enter the country. The point system is controversial. Many people feel that education should be worth more, while many people feel that the experience should be worth more. There's always a tough decision to be made when people are illegally living in Canada, whether to dismiss them to the country or give them a chance. Immigrants have been taking advantage of the system by pretending to be people they are not and entering the country. Most importantly, the toughest thing about immigration is deciding how many immigrants you should allow in the country, as well as if we should focus on the economic aspect of the immigration by bringing in labor workers, or the moral aspect, which is reuniting families. Immigration is a hot button issue regardless of how the Immigration and Refugee Protection Act is amended, and while making decisions regarding immigration, it is impossible to please everyone. It is something that can never be fixed, not because it is broken, but there will always be people who do not agree with the government decision, and that is just the nature of how our society works. Canada is known as one of the safer countries in the world, and that is a result of who we allow and do not allow in our country. Canada has done a pretty good job with the immigration laws, and although there are many problems, it is something that will always have problems. And with what they have done a very good job, as Canada is a great place to live. Thank you.